Hey guys, today we'll be making some really awesome cutting boards. You make cutting boards out of a wide variety of woods. But one thing you do have to keep in mind is that you do want a hardwood. Unfortunately, you can't just go to Home Depot and buy a pine or a cedar and make a cutting board out of it. You're going to want a hardwood that's on the Jockus hardness scale of around 900 to about 1500. And that's where these woods fall in. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and make some cutting boards. We're just going to do simple stripe cutting boards. These are super easy to make, and what's great about them is that you can really make your creativity just flourish on this. There's so many different colored woods that you can put in, just a bunch of different thicknesses and arrangements that you can do with these cutting boards, making every one extremely unique. So with mine, we're going to be using maple, which is actually considered the best type of wood for cutting boards. And I got some beautiful red cherry here. And of course, probably everyone's favorite wood right now, this black walnut. But as you can see here, this is pretty rough cut lumber, so we're going to go ahead and cut this down to size and process it. So before we get cutting, you want to make sure that you have a plan. I'm going to go ahead and make my boards at about 10 inches by 16 inches. But something you have to plan for is pieces in the wood that you can't actually use. We can see here that there's a big knot in this board, so unfortunately we're not able to use this piece for a cutting board. Wow, this is heavy. For other pieces, this would be acceptable if you're doing like the side of a table or something. Knots like this could look pretty cool. But for cutting boards, you cannot have notches where you're going to have harmful bacteria seep in and stay there and rot. So you want to make sure that you cut this out. So I'm going to have to cut my board right here to start off and then take my measurements from here. And unfortunately, this piece I'll have to just save for another project. Here's another example in this piece of cherry. Knots and cracks like this are unacceptable when you're dealing with a cutting board. So to process these boards, we're just going to cut them up with our chop saw real quick. I would always recommend that you should put at least 1, maybe 2 inches extra on your cut. And after we got our pieces chopped up, we're going to run them through the planer. This is all rough cut wood, so it's not been planed before. So I just want to run it through here to give it a smooth surface to make it a lot easier to play with. And I always just like to joint one side of them. You want to do that so that you know that one side is completely straight. And then you just use that jointed side to put against your table saw fence. So I'm cutting up all these maple pieces. I'm making them pretty thick because I want that to be the majority of the cutting board. Then I'm grabbing some walnut, cutting that a little bit thinner, and last I grab some cherry. So guess what I got? Yep, I got this beer right here. Delish. I'm just kidding, but we got a bunch of these wood slices coming out. Slices or pieces or strips. I don't know what you want to call them. Well, we got them cut out, and now it's time to just glue them back together. It actually seems kind of ridiculous. Well, don't think about it. Come over here and I'll show you what I'm doing. So this is actually where the fun part begins. Well, I mean, I'm just kidding. We've been having fun this whole time, right? So we got all these different colors of wood, all these different lengths too. And as long as we know that these things are square, you can see that, right? Oof, perfect. So as long as we know that they're square, we know that they'll easily fit together. That's why making sure everything is square is super important. But this is actually where you're going to make your creativity kind of go a little bit. And here is for sure the fun part about it is that you can mix and match whatever you want to do. Okay, I think you get it. There's like a million different ways that you can set this cutting board up. But for me, I'm really liking this style, so I'm going to stick with this. But before we start gluing up, I always like to dry fit it. That just means we're going to go ahead and throw on some clamps here and then make sure that there's no cracks in between the boards before we actually glue them up. And if we were making sure everything was square, we shouldn't have a problem here. So I'm just going to make sure everything's nice and tight. And we can look at the back here and we can see that there's no gaps in between these boards. So I'd say we're good to go. We're going to glue this up. No, I don't think there's really any easy way to do this. The best way to do it is to have one of those little glue paintbrush things, or rollers I should say. I don't have one, so finger's going to have to do. These little strips are actually kind of annoying. It takes forever. So, this is the part of the video where I speed up super fast. And go! So no, this isn't a waste of glue. You want to make sure that it's completely filled with glue so that every little void is full, so we don't have any chicken juices or whatever you're going to be using on this cutting board to get into the cracks. Glue's pretty darn cheap, so you just want to use a lot of it. And wasting a little bit of glue is a lot better than having your project crack in half later on. So we gotta wait for this glue to dry now. And if you're a subscriber, you probably know what we're going to do. And hey, if you're not a subscriber, what the hell's the matter with you? Hit that subscribe button. Oh, Jesus. Good thing it's on tight. So I lost all my footage for when the glue dried, but all you want to do is unclamp it and then throw it through the planer a couple of times, making sure that you get everything even. There we go. We can see how beautiful and smooth this is now. But obviously this won't do, so we're going to go ahead and chop that off the table saw. So our cutting board is starting to look really nice. We got some nice smooth edges here. The only problem is these are sharp. Ah! Ow! Corner actually did hurt. So we're going to be removing these sharp edges with the router. I'll just be using a 1/4 inch roundover bit. It looks a lot like this. And this is just going to give a roundness to our corners. That way it's not sharp and poking you. If you don't have a router, I guess you could sand the heck out of it, but it's going to be a little uneven. So if you're going to take on a project like this, you do kind of need the right tools for it. So since this bit does have a bearing on top, you technically don't need the fence, but I like to use it. Doesn't really affect you, and I think it's a little bit safer. So let's round out these edges. So here's the part where if you want to, you can go ahead and put a juice groove in here. I understand the need for one for them chicken juices. You don't want them spilling off the board or anything like that. I'm saying chicken juices a lot in this episode. But in all honesty, I don't like the look of that. So I'm not putting a juice groove in here. But if you wanted to, all you gotta do is take your router, put in your appropriate bit, and then you just gotta kind of frame in a wall around your cutting board and follow that, cutting out your juice groove. So if you're like me, you can go ahead and skip that step, and we get to go on to sanding. So I'm not going to bore you with a video of me sanding super fast. So we're going to go ahead and skip what I'm done. Just make sure that you start out with around 100 grit and end in a 320 or maybe even finer than that. And make sure you're getting all the edges too. And if you got a juice groove, probably sand in there too. Ugh, done. God, I hate sanding. Alright guys, we're done sanding and we are in the home stretch. So these things are just obviously covered in sawdust. I'm going to take a wet rag and kind of just clean them up real quick. So a wet rag is going to be able to pull that sawdust off pretty much the best it can. When we go ahead and put our oil or wax, whatever you want to do, you want to make sure that you don't have that dust on it. And you kind of get a sneak peek of what it's going to look like. It's looking good. I guess I should clarify, not wet rag, a damp rag. You don't want it soaking wet. You want to wring it out really good before you actually put it on the wood. I'm just going to give this a little bit to air dry. Time for a beer.
Alright, so these are pretty much just dry now. For the next part I'm going to bring you down here because this is everyone's favorite part. Now we can't send these cutting boards just out like this. We're going to have to put a sealant on here. That's not really a sealant, it's just an oil or a wax. So I just went ahead and picked up some cutting board oil. It's kind of like mineral oil. A lot of people use walrus wax, that works really good too, or tongue oil. But like I said, this is everyone's favorite part, so cue the music.
Hey, so cutting boards are complete, and hey, they turned out pretty good. These things are pretty fun to make, and if you got the right tools, they're super easy. I really like the styles of these, and hey, these are going to make some great gifts. And hey, even if you're looking to make some extra money in your spare time, making cutting boards is a good gig. But there's my video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And I'll see you on the next project. Woo!